One of the things that needs to be said to the public, we always talk about the horror of rising healthcare costs, and it's a real problem. But there's a flip side to it, and the flip side is that in a democracy, people ought to buy what they want to buy, and people want health, and so they're willing to put more and more of their disposable income into health. The other flip side is that it's the biggest employer in America today. Those auto jobs that I think Dr. Sebastian or someone talked about that have gone away have been replaced by the healthcare industry. So it's not a zero-sum game. It really does all work together. Having said that, I think what David said about lowest common denominator is a real worry. As we obsess on costs, we're going to drive this system into a place that we don't want it to be. And so we've got to constantly educate the public and try to get public policies that recognize those problems.
Can I make a follow-up on that? A hopeful note. I co-chair the Partnership to Fight Chronic Disease with former Governor Florio. This is a group that got together about a year ago and said, we're not getting any support for chronic disease, and we want to make it pivotal in any reform discussions in the 50 states and federally. Raging success. I mean, there is no proposal that's on the table now that does not have a pillar that is tied to chronic disease, because a group of people like this organization got in a room and said, we're not going to allow that to become a commodity. It's exactly the same problem. The problem is that nobody has done the work that you have done now to pull people together and start to push that ball up the hill. And there's hopeful results from that effort, and the partnership's a beautiful example of it that has really put this as a central plank of everything they're discussing in health reform. It can be done.
One more, this young lady right here.
I like that young. Beverly Stern, Executive Director of New Jersey State School Nurses Association. And I have a two-pronged question. The first is, what can industry and foundations do to promote the health professions in the early grades, the elementary school? It used to be in the 50s that being a physician was the highest aspiration you could have next to being clergy. Now it's being an MBA from Harvard. The other issue that I have is, how can we, in some form of tort reform, define the difference between malpractice, which is bad acts, not usual and customary and reasonable, and a bad result. Malpractice suits are brought for a bad result, not necessarily because there was any lack of good, competent medical judgment.
Anybody want to tackle either of those? I'll take the second one if no one else wants to.
I'll just comment, because I think the point that you're getting to is about the nature of risk-taking, and we need to take risks to drive innovation. Litigation, by its nature, is designed to constrain and punish inappropriate risk-taking. And I think as a society, we have changed the bar so far to the other side of what's appropriate in terms of what to expect when people take actions that don't have good outcomes. And I think there are steps that we need to take. There is no way that we can have serious healthcare reform and not address tort reform. So.
On the first, I think one thing we lack, frankly, are role models. And I'm sure my parents complained about the influence of television on my generation. Now we can complain about the influence of the entertainment media and internet. It is what it is, that our role models are role models that are sort of overnight success, big ticket, big bucks, without a whole lot of effort, because there's not enough to bring out other real life stories about what it is that you can do when you leave school, and how those are also pathways either to important and contributing lifestyles, as well as potentially lucrative if that's the direction that you want to go. And so it kind of goes back to what I was describing earlier. Until or unless we can bring into the classroom examples that connect social studies, mathematics, science, they call it language arts, and spelling, to things that you do after you leave high school and maybe even after you leave college, there's no way to get that influence brought in. the family doctor was a different role model 30 or 40 years ago than now the person that you may see when you go to a practice and it rotates through 5 or 6 different people. As you said, that was the ultimate goal for many kids in terms of any kind of scientific aspirations, was to be able to move into the practice of medicine. It doesn't have that same cachet and glory, and unless we can find ways in which we demonstrate not only that, but the person working in the laboratories, the person working in the refinery that produces the raw materials that go in, all those other things, if there's no connection that makes those equally important to potentially shooting a good 3-point shot, we're going to fight a losing battle.
Yes, Doctor.
I think there was earlier a comment that I really agreed with, and that is we're not training enough doctors, and the cost of medical training is now unconscionable. Why in the world should it cost several $100,000 when I went to Stanford Medical School in the 1970s and it cost me $6,000. And it wasn't that long ago. How could it have increased by that much? And the same thing is true of pharmaceutical and so forth. And we need to take a close look at what is driving the costs. But I think there should be one other question that we should be bringing up, and that is, if we have more doctors, the cost of doctors will decrease. I mean, that's a marketing principle. If you have enough people who want to be doctors, the cost of it will decline. And so somebody needs to do a detailed study of this and say, okay, should the government be sending, let's say, 10,000 less troops to Afghanistan and save $10 billion to invest into, subsidizing medical education in the United States for the next 10 years? And nursing education. I mean, this is the kind of thing that can be readily done. They just spent $10 billion on a stimulus. This is true stimulus, and this actually could solve one of the major problems that we have.
I think we better get you on the phone with the president before he gives this speech.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
I thank our panelists. They have done a fabulous job and really educated me and all of us in the room. So we deeply grateful for your time, which is your most valuable. I just have to end with 2 very quick personal stories so that you know the importance of what we're talking about today. I'm really old. I grew up in the 50s, and polio was rampant in St. Louis when I grew up. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, the day that a girl that I went to elementary school with on the street behind us came down with polio. And the whole neighborhood gathered outside her house as the ambulance brought her iron lung, which she was in, out of the house. We went back to our house, my brother and me and my parents, and sat in silence through dinner that night because we all were convinced that we were all going to get polio. In fact, I had psychosomatic symptoms in the days after that. My legs were numb off and on because I thought I was getting polio. I was that frightened. I was terrorized. And then Jonas Salk, as John said, came out and lifted the problem away from us. Miraculously. Gave us life when we anticipated death. Then go forward to 1972. I have 3 children. My oldest is Matt, and he was having flu symptoms. Long story short, they diagnosed him with terminal cancer, had a huge tumor on his prostate, one of 3 reported cases at the time of that kind of tumor on the prostate in a young child. Tried, a couple of days later, a resident came in and said, we found a triple drug therapy that this tumor is usually found behind the eye. We've never seen it here. We don't think it'll work, but we're going to give him max radiation, max chemotherapy. We may kill him with the stuff, but we got to try. And so we tried. Matt's 39. He's a graduate of Duke University, Kellogg School. He is in business with me every day. I talk to him 3 or 4 times a day. He has 2 grandsons.